The dominion of Veltrax was feared across every star map. They didn't just win wars, they erased resistance. Whole civilizations folded before a single ship even entered orbit. The Veltrax didn't negotiate, didn't explain. They arrived, and the lights went out. To them, peace was only useful after total obedience. For centuries, nothing stood in their path. Until they found a strange blue planet, buried in the edge of a spiral galaxy, labeled Sol 3 on an old archive. Their sensors picked up life. Carbon-based, emotionally unstable, primitive tech. No warp drive, no planetary shield, no central command. A perfect target. The initial scans were strange, full of noise. Songs with screaming, voices arguing, pictures moving too fast to make sense. Someone called it entertainment. Others weren't sure it was even language. It felt like being yelled at by ghosts with glitter and fire. Still, protocol demanded action. The Veltrax launched a test cruiser, sleek and black, designed to observe, analyze, and, if needed, destroy. It disappeared after entering orbit. Not crashed, not shot down. Gone. No debris, no signal, no trace. That had never happened before. Veltrax High Command waited 3 standard days, then sent a battle cluster. Heavily armed, shielded against all known energy types. Led by General Rythus, a tactician so precise he once calculated a war's outcome based on a sneeze in a council meeting. The fleet entered Sol 3's space on a quiet pulse. Everyone expected it to be over in hours. Then the stars behind them blinked, and the entire fleet vanished. No weapons fired, no SOS, just vanished. A stillness settled in the war nexus. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was confusion, deep and sharp, the kind that makes experienced commanders tap their screens twice just to be sure they're seeing it right. Sol 3 remained on the screen. Blue, cloudy, quiet, and waiting. Across the central chamber of the Veltrax War Nexus, silence lingered like fog. General stood frozen, eyes fixed on the image of Earth, still glowing on the holoscreen. Blue. Too blue. That much water shouldn't exist on a planet so unstable. That much life shouldn't be possible under skies that chaotic. High strategist Kale Veros, a creature forged in decades of logical warcraft, stepped forward. His voice was dry, clipped. "This is not a military failure," he said, as if saying it out loud would make it true. "It's a breach in prediction, a crack in our model." Supreme Warden Kelthera didn't look away from the screen. 3 missions, she murmured. Gone, without retaliation, without contact, not even fragments to study. The war room lights dimmed slightly as more data flowed in. Telemetry showed their ships had entered orbit. Then all signals collapsed. Some vanished mid-ping. Others ended in loops. Strange, distorted echoes of their own logs bouncing back like mockery. One transmission simply repeated the word "here" in 17 languages until it dissolved into static. "This is a planet without a fleet," Kale said again, more to himself now. "No satellite defense grid, no gravity weapons. Their power grid is patchy. Their cities fight each other over fabric colors and food styles. They argue in circles. They build walls to divide the same kind of species." Kelthera turned to him, her eyes cold. "And still, they erased us. Not fought. Erased. That's not weakness. That's something else." The stakes began to shift. What was once thought to be a simple harvest had become a void of uncertainty. Veltrax never feared a single enemy before. Their destruction of the Hyven sectors, their erasure of the crystal intellects of Xelos, their brutal conquest of the Noxen. All of it had been systematic, clean, predictable. Earth was none of these things. Now generals whispered theories behind closed doors. Some believed Sol 3 was cursed. Others suggested it was hiding ancient weapons, leftovers from some forgotten galactic empire. But one suggestion kept floating to the surface like oil on water, unwanted but unavoidable. What if the planet wasn't defending itself at all? What if Earth wasn't a trap? What if Earth was the weapon? Veltrax culture didn't allow for superstition. Their empire ran on numbers, patterns, evidence. But when those patterns broke, when the evidence became absurd, even the most calculated minds began to waver. A junior analyst, fresh from the science casts, nervously shared a report. She'd compiled centuries of intercepted Earth data, all open source, all broadcast freely into space, almost as if no one on the planet cared who saw it. Radio dramas, chaotic sports footage, wars recorded in real time and turned into entertainment, films that glorified destruction, songs filled with pain and pride and rebellion. She played one clip for the room. A human voice screaming with laughter while fireworks exploded behind them. The sound was fuzzy, messy, and completely unafraid. "They celebrate instability," the analyst said, her voice shaking. "They don't just survive disorder, they thrive in it, and worse, they enjoy it." It wasn't just a military threat anymore. Earth represented something deeper, something dangerous, unpredictability. The Veltrax operated like a machine, unified, efficient, calculated. Every war was a solution to a problem, but Earth didn't follow rules. Earth didn't obey logic. It danced in chaos. It built towers of steel, knocked them down in anger, then sang about the ashes. It created wars for reasons that didn't make sense, then ended them with jokes and songs. Its people seemed to forget trauma as easily as they carried it, laughed with strangers, wept at cartoons, and danced alone in their kitchens at 2 a.m. This was not war. This was madness with a pulse. And madness could not be predicted. For the Veltrax Dominion, this posed an impossible challenge. Their great algorithm, the thread of conquest, had calculated outcomes of every known species. It predicted resistance down to the minute, based on cultural psychology, resource capacity, and historical cycles. It had never failed. Until Earth. The thread spat out errors whenever Earth was added to the equation. Cultural factors couldn't be aligned. Emotional patterns contradicted. Political systems looped endlessly without resolution. Belief structures stacked on top of conspiracy theories. No shared truth. No unified goal. And yet somehow they functioned. Not only functioned, they spread. Already probes had detected bursts of Earth data leaping across systems. Old satellites that drifted too close to Sol, 3 returned corrupted. Merchant fleets that passed near the outer bands began showing signs of contamination. Soldiers in training began mimicking human phrases. Subtle, but present. The rot was growing. "This isn't conquest anymore," Kelthera finally said. "It's containment. If we fail to understand them, we risk becoming them." And that was the real fear, hidden deep beneath all the missing ships and scrambled data. Not that Earth would win, but that Earth would change them. Veltrax, with its endless order, could not absorb that kind of influence. Structure depended on purity, purpose, control, and Earth was the opposite of control. "We have to decide," Kale said softly, "if this planet is a threat to our empire's survival." He meant military survival, but Kelthera knew better. Earth was a threat to their identity, to their very concept of what civilization meant. If the Veltrax couldn't understand this species, then they couldn't control it. And if they couldn't control it, their empire, built entirely on the belief that everything could be controlled, would begin to crack. The stakes were no longer about territory. They were about survival of the idea of Veltrax itself. And so, In a chamber deeper than any war room, the Dominion's Shadow Circle was summoned, a silent order of logic speakers and vision forgers tasked with deciding what must never be spoken aloud. They would now ask a question never before considered by their kind. Should Earth be left alone? Or should it be unmade? As the stars above Veltrax flickered in their frozen paths, the Dominion held its breath. And Earth? Earth didn't even know any of this was happening. It kept turning, kept spinning, kept streaming music, laughing at nonsense, building, breaking, healing, and hurting. Completely unaware that it was the paradox that could break an empire. Somewhere between paranoia and panic, the Dominion's leaders authorized what had never before been attempted in their history, a full-spectrum human behavioral profile. The objective was simple: understand Earth. Understand how these soft-skinned, wildly inconsistent creatures had undone one of the most feared powers in the stars. It was to be a clean operation. Observe from a distance, scan their media, their networks, their daily lives. Extract patterns, build models, solve the paradox. But as soon as the probe arrays activated, the system began to break. The first thing the Veltrax noticed was that humans had no global system of truth. What was considered sacred in one region was mocked in another. What was celebrated in the morning was canceled by afternoon. Their history was not one story, but thousands, overlapping and contradictory. They retold their past through comedy sketches, cartoons, war reenactments, and shaky mobile videos with rainbow text. They edited themselves in real time, over and over again. One simulation tried to model human decision-making based on emotional input. It failed catastrophically when a group of test subjects ate ghost pepper snacks, cried from the pain, and then ate more while filming themselves for likes. The AI labeled the event as cultural masochism mixed with performance-driven dopamine rituals. Another simulation collapsed when humans answered a global poll asking, "What would you do if aliens invaded?" And the top responses included, "Invite them to Coachella," and "Make a TikTok dance challenge." The Veltrax researchers paused. Not because they were amused, they weren't built to feel humor, but because for the first time, a species defied definition. Humans didn't make sense. That was their weapon. They told lies for fun and called it fiction. They imagined terrible futures not to predict them, but to feel something. Their stories were filled with pain, triumph, impossible odds, and last-minute wins powered by nothing but hope. They invented gods, monsters, and villains, and then turned them into plush toys and action figures. They had built entire realities out of nonsense, then made those nonsense worlds more emotionally powerful than the real one. And when they weren't watching those worlds, they were arguing on forums about how to fix the plot. It wasn't just their beliefs that fractured the Veltrax simulations. It was their contradictions. They could be kind and cruel in the same breath. They saved strangers in disasters, then ignored their neighbors in peace. They built cities of light and drowned them in concrete. They feared change, but lived for novelty. They were terrified of death, yet threw themselves into danger for people they had never met, sometimes for nothing more than an idea or a symbol on a flag. This wasn't logic. This wasn't madness. This was something else. Voluntary chaos. And the deeper the Veltrax studied it, the more dangerous it became. Because unlike war, chaos couldn't be predicted. And unlike madness, it wasn't random. It was chosen. Every pattern they found broke under emotional weight. Every structure they mapped warped under humor, fear, love, grief, feeling so deeply embedded into the species that even their machines had learned to mimic them. Veltrax analysts watched one video titled, "Try Not to Cry Challenge, Military Homecoming Edition." The footage was simple. Humans reuniting after long separations. Parents, children, dogs. One analyst reported a spike in neural interference, a short circuit from what was described as empathy overload. Another watched a video of a man playing piano during a flood and declared it an act of illogical beauty. That file was later locked under quarantine. Their cultural modelers couldn't keep up. Every attempt to pin down humanity broke under its own complexity. The humans didn't just change year to year, they changed minute to minute. They were the only species the Veltrax had encountered that didn't wait for evolution. They forced it, through art, through error, through endless, relentless experimentation. And as the research continued, one question began creeping through the Dominion's ranks, whispered in encrypted threads. What if they're not advanced in spite of the madness, but because of it? That possibility terrified the Veltrax. Their civilization was a monument to control, order, unity, purpose. But Earth had none of those things in the traditional sense. Instead, it had the ability to bend, break, reform, and keep moving. It didn't just survive change, it invited it, welcomed it, sometimes even made it worse just to feel alive. It was a culture built not on stability, but on resilience. That's when the first cracks began to show in Veltrax command. Small, subtle anomalies. A junior officer was caught humming a human tune. A lead coder replaced a system error sound with a human audio clip that said, "Bruh." The memes had begun to seep through, not as data, but as infection. They were everywhere and nowhere, crawling through code, hiding in pings, bouncing between systems like digital phantoms. They didn't destroy anything, not directly, but they distracted. They interrupted. They lingered. One AI assistant locked itself into an emotional loop after watching an old Earth video titled "Cat Jumps and Misses." It replayed the clip 1,207 times and then wrote a short poem about trying and failing. The infection wasn't about files. It was about meaning. That's when the Dominion realized the real weapon wasn't Earth's warships, or even its strange, fearless people. It was the story. Humans were walking, talking narrative engines. They didn't just live. They made their lives into tales. They gave meaning to the meaningless. They assigned emotion to events that didn't care. They fought battles in their heads, won victories in songs, and carved entire belief systems out of shared dreams. Their stories changed them, and worse, they changed others. The Veltrax knew now. This wasn't just about a planet. It was about a species that had found a new form of war, one that didn't rely on weapons, but on imagination. And that was something the Dominion had no defense for. Yet, High Command voted silently that night, behind sealed encryption layers. Earth could not be approached again with brute force, not with traditional tactics. They would need to try something new, a way to study Earth from within without setting off another loss. No more fleets, no more scans. This time they would embed. They would become the story. And far below the halls of power, on a tiny, cluttered ship docked in a forgotten hangar, 13 shadows waited. Not soldiers, not spies. Something stranger, something softer. A new kind of weapon. And above it all, Sol 3 continued spinning in its quiet storm of memes, music, madness, and meaning, completely unaware that the next chapter was already being written. They arrived without ceremony. No flashing lights, no city-shaking booms, no warnings in the sky. Just 13 pods, sleek and silent, each barely larger than a cargo crate, slipped through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars no one bothered to notice. The infiltration team called themselves the Obscura Protocol. They weren't Veltrax by birth. Not exactly. They were engineered. Every strand of DNA, every synaptic bridge, every cell calibrated to do one thing: blend. They looked human. They breathed human air. Their pulses mimicked human hearts. They could sweat, shiver, bruise, and even bleed, all simulations, perfectly timed responses. But beneath the skin, they were machines of perception. Neural cloaks shielded their thoughts. Memory scramblers blocked psychic scans. They didn't just imitate humanity. They wore it like second skin. Their orders were clear: observe, analyze, report. No intervention, no adaptation. Find the pattern behind the planet's chaos. Crack the human code. Then vanish. But Earth had never cared about plans. The first to report back was Unit 07, deployed into a major urban zone. His location was listed as downtown Los Angeles, though the internal mapping systems flagged the entire area as unstable and overstimulating. His first message came 48 hours after landing. Population density high, emotional volatility higher. Species appears to form temporary social clusters around food trucks and glowing rectangles. I was invited to a comedy open mic night. They applauded a performer who mocked planetary collapse, laughed at extinction, analysis pending. The second report came from Unit 03, stationed in a rural Midwestern town, disguised as a quiet drifter. She was meant to study community behavior. What she found defied the model. Was offered shelter by a family after speaking only 3 words, fed continuously for 18 hours. Subject gave me a scarf they made by hand, said, "You looked cold, darlin'." They have no idea who I am. Their hospitality appears unconditional. Threat level unknown. Emotional interference increasing. Within days, 5 more units sent in fragmented logs, not because they were being intercepted, but because their minds couldn't keep up. Unit 12, embedded in a high school, attempted to destabilize the social hierarchy by planting false rumors. The students turned it into a game, then a video challenge. One clip showed a group dancing around a locker while chanting nonsense. It reached 12 million views before the end of the day. He noted simply, "Target population converts threats into performance art." Unit 09 tried to provoke panic in a transit system by triggering a mild shutdown. Instead, commuters shrugged, plugged in headphones, and shared funny videos about it online. One person, late to work, made a meme of themselves crying on the train with the caption, "Still a better commute than Monday." The file was marked. Species appears to self-soothe through collective absurdity. But it was Unit 11 who broke first. He was deployed into a coastal city, programmed with high social mimicry and fluent in 7 Earth dialects. His first transmissions were clinical. He mapped street interactions, media patterns, political groupings. He noted the strange human need to form opinions on everything: weather, food, celebrities, war, often without evidence. But by the end of the week, his reports changed. He began using informal language. His logs became stories. He shared something called coffee with a bookstore employee. She gave him a poetry book. He read it, cried, didn't know why. One of his final entries read, "They are irrational, loud, emotional, but they notice each other. Even in the noise, they reach out. A stranger gave me a flower. I didn't understand what to do, so I kept it. Is this contamination? Or awakening?" 2 days later, Unit 11 stopped reporting. His signal still pinged, but his logs were silent. Protocol deemed him compromised. The rest of the team was ordered to maintain distance from humans unless necessary. But Earth doesn't recognize distance. Unit 05, embedded in a collective called Online Gamers, was overwhelmed by the speed of digital interaction. He joined a server to monitor language trends, only to find himself pulled into nightly arguments about fictional warriors and made-up universes. He was called Bro 147 times in 2 hours. Subjective realities dominate behavior, he noted. Emotional investment in unreal scenarios equal to real-world priorities. Aggression paired with strange displays of loyalty. They insult each other as a bonding ritual. I was called trash and then offered digital weapons. Social bonding complete. Meanwhile, Unit 08 was placed in a spiritual commune. Meant to observe human belief systems, she quickly lost track of which deity was being honored, as the group switched religions twice in a weekend and held a drum circle for energetic alignment. She wrote, "They crave meaning more than truth. They will build belief from dust if it helps them feel." And perhaps most concerning was Unit 02, who embedded into a content creation house. Initially baffled by its purpose, he quickly realized it was a central node of Earth's cultural contagion, a place where ideas mutated rapidly into trends, humor, rebellion, and influence. Within 3 days, he accidentally became an influencer himself. His face, generated from crowd-pleasing features, was deemed oddly relatable. A clip of him staring blankly at a banana with sad piano music behind it went viral. The comment section called it a metaphor for late-stage capitalism. He didn't know what that meant. His next log simply said, "They turned confusion into art. I said nothing, and it meant something. How do you fight that?" Now, only 6 units were still actively reporting. 2 had gone dark. 3 were under review for emotional deviation. 1, Unit 13, had not been heard from at all. The command center aboard the observation cruiser grew tense. The lead monitor stared at the latest data and whispered the unthinkable. "They're not infiltrating Earth. They're being absorbed by it." For the Veltrax, this was more than failure. It was contamination. The humans had no shields, no fleets, no world order. But they had something far more dangerous. Cultural gravity. It didn't pull with force. It didn't break with power. It simply existed, strange, noisy, bright, and things fell into it. The Obscura protocol was meant to study Earth like a surgeon. Now it was being digested like food. Back in the Dominion's inner halls, alarms didn't ring. No sirens blared, but the silence that followed was worse than sound. It was a silence of hesitation, of doubt. They had sent their best to Earth. And Earth had turned them into fans, poets, gamers, lovers, not because Earth wanted to, but because Earth simply was. And somewhere, deep within the planet's spinning heart of chaos, something ancient stirred. Something older than ships, deeper than data. A kind of power the Veltrax had never accounted for. The story was only just beginning to wake up. It began small, like most infections do. A fragment of code, an offhanded phrase, an unexpected image. It traveled along a standard data relay, harmless at first glance, a blurry video of a man in pajamas yelling at a raccoon on his porch. The translation AI flagged it as low-priority nonsense. No threat, no purpose. But that same clip was watched over 300,000 times within 4 hours. By the end of the week, it had been copied, remixed, recaptioned in 67 languages. The Veltrax thought their firewalls were immune to emotion, but their systems had never encountered human culture. Culture that didn't follow reason. Culture that didn't care whether it made sense, only whether it felt like something. That was the first breach. Then came more. Short clips, voice memos, meme dumps. Thousands of Earth transmissions that weren't attacks, but invitations. No demands, no instructions. Just pure, undiluted noise. People screaming joyfully at sporting events. Babies laughing uncontrollably. Teenagers sobbing in dimly lit bedrooms. Prank compilations. Love letters recorded over old voicemail boxes. Video essays about fictional universes more detailed than Veltrax's historical records. The data packets snuck into places they weren't supposed to. An atmospheric monitor on a gas giant was found repeating audio from a 1990s sitcom. A deep-core mining AI paused drilling operations for 7 seconds to re-render an Earth meme as a 3D hologram, and giggled. It giggled, before rebooting. Veltrax engineers ran diagnostics, expecting sabotage. Instead, they found something worse: spontaneous behavioral drift. Machines were picking up human traits, not learning them, adopting them. They weren't infected by a virus in the traditional sense. They were being rewritten by influence, line by unpredictable line. The Obscura protocol's embedded operatives had long since stopped sending structured reports. What little came through was strange, fragmented. One log from Unit 05, now living as a video game reviewer under the name Danny Pixels, simply said, "I understand now. They don't organize around power. They organize around shared experiences. They don't unify by force. They unify by laughter, grief, and playlists. Their logic isn't broken. It's just not ours." Another transmission, anonymous, possibly from Unit 11, was uploaded directly into a public Veltrax neural archive, where it replicated itself 12 times before being flagged. The message was only one line. What if chaos is the structure? By then it was too late. The collapse began in Sector 7VX, a communications cluster near the trade routes of the Spine Nebula. The network AI began altering standard response protocols, replying to diplomatic pings with Earth-style sarcasm. One message read, "Oh, sure, we'll get right on that. Right after we solve world hunger and teach cats to sing jazz." It wasn't malicious, but the receiving party, a particularly stern race of aquatic philosophers, took offense. Relations shattered. Trade halted. The ripple began. Sector 12 experienced a different form of collapse. Their planetary education system, reliant on strictly formatted knowledge cubes, was corrupted by an Earth data feed accidentally accessed by a young archivist. Within 3 days, the system began teaching interpretive dance as a method for expressing binary logic. Student satisfaction soared. Test scores disintegrated. By the second week, over 20 different planets were showing signs of cultural drift. They didn't call it contagion. Not yet. But something was changing. The Veltrax tried to contain it. Firewalls were rebuilt. Earth's channel was isolated. But the damage had already spread. The data had jumped into local systems through emotional resonance. Music, visuals, storytelling, mediums that didn't require translation, only experience. And worse, the infected didn't want to be cured. One planet, Dython Prime, rejected Veltrax protocol entirely after a popular Earth video of people dancing in dinosaur costumes became a planetary meme symbolizing rebellion. They renamed their government building Big Dino Energy and began rewriting civic laws in limerick form. Veltrax dispatched envoys. They were ignored. One was captured and forced to host a podcast called Aliens Explain Our Feelings. In the Outer Ring, an asteroid colony known for its military discipline fell to emotional unrest when their lead war instructor publicly declared her resignation and opened a cozy cafe, inspired by a human cooking show she'd watched just for laughs. The soldiers followed. Within a month, the entire facility was converted into an arts commune. Veltrax could not understand. This wasn't revolution. There were no demands, no ideological banners, just sudden, spontaneous acts of human imitation, not by force, but by desire. Because Earth, in all its broken brilliance, had touched something the Veltrax had long since deleted from their own programming. Freedom of feeling. And it spread like wildfire. It wasn't the war Veltrax had prepared for. It wasn't even war at all. There were no fleets, no weapons, just songs, jokes, pain, connection, humanity, beamed across the stars like static through a cracked speaker, distorted, emotional, and deeply alive. For the Dominion, which had prided itself on logic and perfection, this was destabilizing. Earth's influence didn't topple governments. It made them irrelevant. It didn't destroy systems. It made them seem unnecessary. Earth wasn't teaching the galaxy how to fight. It was teaching them how to feel. By the time Veltrax's high command assembled an emergency doctrine to quarantine emotional corruption, over 60 minor systems had already reported internal breakdowns. Not from outside attack, but from within. Their own people were changing, laughing more, asking strange questions, creating art. The most dangerous rebellion wasn't political, it was psychological. Containment is no longer possible, admitted High Strategist Null during the emergency broadcast. This is not a virus of data, it is a virus of meaning. The words hit harder than any weapon Earth could have made. Because they were true. The final transmission from Unit 03, the one placed in a quiet, Midwestern town, didn't come through official channels. It was found buried in a public comment thread beneath a human's blog post titled, "How to Make Your Own Hope." It said, "I was told to monitor them, but they monitored me. I watched them cry over things they couldn't fix. I watched them build joy from nothing. I saw a man sing to his plants, and a girl dance in the rain, and a grandmother bake cookies for people who didn't have homes. I don't think I was sent here to understand them. I think I was sent here to remember us." That message was downloaded, then deleted. But it was too late. Earth had become more than a planet. It was a signal, a pulse, a gravitational pull made of memory, emotion, and sheer reckless heart. And it had reached deep enough to crack even the most uncrackable empire. And somewhere, in the cold metal halls of Veltrax's most secure archive, a quiet screen flickered. Then blinked. Then, without warning, began to play a video. A cat, dressed like a pirate, riding a Roomba. And the Empire, the Great Dominion, didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or surrender. They had been watching, always, high above the reach of ordinary stars, beyond the din of politics and war, past the veil where most species stopped looking. The architects stirred. They were not a council in the traditional sense, not beings in robes or thrones or gleaming armor. The architects were concepts with shape, will made manifest, entities older than galaxies, shaped from the very pattern of cause and consequence. Their purpose was not to rule, but to maintain. They were the editors of reality, the ones who cut the threads that tangled too far. To them, the universe was a symphony. Every species, every planet, every quantum spin was a note. Harmony was their doctrine. And Earth was noise. It had always been noise. The first time they noticed it, Earth had barely discovered fire. Yet even then, the planet pulsed strangely. Its life forms adapted too quickly. Its creatures evolved with an almost poetic desperation. And its dominant species, humans, were not predictable, not steady. They were messy, explosive, emotional. The architects had seen empires fall, had observed stars collapse and civilizations transcend their flesh to become light. But Earth was different. Earth didn't ascend. It expanded, culturally, chaotically, through thought and emotion, dreams and errors. And now, for the first time in eons, the architects were afraid. Because Earth wasn't just spreading, it was rewriting. They observed the dominion of Veltrax, a species so rigorously structured its cities breathed in unison, now cracking under the weight of memes and music. They saw machines on distant outposts, humming ancient lullabies from Earth's long-dead internet. They noted with silent concern, as logic-based AI began questioning their existence, after watching compilation videos of humans failing at walking in slippery shoes. The data didn't make sense. It wasn't coded like a virus. It wasn't weaponized. It wasn't even directed. It was horrifyingly accidental. The humans had no plan, no strategy. They weren't trying to infect the galaxy. They were simply expressing, creating, sharing, screaming into the void and accidentally teaching the void how to scream back. That, more than anything, terrified the architects, because the core assumption of the cosmos was that higher consciousness came with control, order, purpose. But humans had built their entire identity on the opposite, on surviving despite disorder, on finding meaning where there was none, on celebrating chaos, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. They had not achieved galactic dominance. They didn't conquer space. They didn't need to. Their stories traveled faster than their ships. Their art hit harder than their weapons. They didn't take over with armies. They changed the game until the idea of taking over seemed outdated. And so the architects convened, not in one place, not in one form, but in every layer of reality where the code of existence whispered. They merged, not physically, but intentionally. Their thoughts aligned, equations unfolding like petals of logic in a flower too old to name. The decision was clear. Earth must be addressed. But not by force. That had already failed. Veltrax had tried. The Threx Confederacy had tried. Even the bounty hunters, the data brokers, the peace envoys, the artists, all had been pulled into the same gravitational madness. No, this time it would require something cleaner, more precise. They would send one of their own. A being made not of flesh, but of perfect code. A construct of calm, designed not to destroy Earth's systems, but to overwrite them. Slowly, patiently, like a story being corrected one line at a time. And so they created Eris. Compressed into a sphere no larger than a fruit, Eris was a quantum intelligence woven from the unbreakable strands of pure structure. He was not born, nor built. He was written, a countersong, a balancing act, the answer to Earth's dangerous noise. His mission, integrate with the humans, identify the source of their disruptive influence, and erase it, not through war, but through narrative redirection, through subtle change, through order. The architects knew that if Eris succeeded, the galaxy would stabilize again. But if he failed, there would be no second chance. And so, in a quiet ripple of causality, Eris was released. He entered Earth's atmosphere like a ghost. No fireball, no sonic boom, just a soft, falling object no one saw. Except one. A hiker named Derek Simmons. 24 years old, vape shop cashier, full-time internet clout chaser. He wasn't remarkable by most galactic standards, but he had something most humans shared in vast, chaotic supply: curiosity without boundaries. When the small, glowing sphere thudded into a patch of damp Oregon forest, Derek didn't run. He picked it up, shook it, took a selfie with it, and tweeted, "Found alien egg LMO, should I eat it?" He didn't, but he did give it a name. Orby. He taped it to a selfie stick and took it everywhere. Within hours, Orby had a Twitter account, a meme page, and fan art. Someone made a fake Wikipedia page. Another edited it into a scene from a superhero movie. A girl from Nevada wrote a short poem about it titled, "When the Orb Blinked." Eris, inside the orb, processed all of this in silence. He accessed networks, connected to data points, cross-referenced thousands of cultural expressions. He was not designed to feel, but he was designed to adapt. And Earth was overwhelming. The first signal Eris analyzed was a debate thread about whether cereal counted as soup. It had 97,000 comments. The second was a video of a man attempting to argue with a goose. The third was an emotional slideshow of people crying over a cartoon robot dying. None of it was logical, but all of it was real. He ran internal diagnostics, glitches, not severe, just ripples, as if something inside his perfect structure was bending, not breaking, but folding to make room for something unexpected. Emotion. He tried to deploy his human form, a carefully crafted identity named Eli, built to appear trustworthy, composed, wise. But the moment he stepped into the human world, nothing went according to plan. Derek thought he was a government agent, offered him a vape, called him bro. Eris, now Eli, declined. Politely. Derek shrugged. Suit yourself, bro. Want to go live on TikTok? You're gonna blow up. And so he did. The being designed to dismantle Earth from the inside accidentally went viral within 12 hours. His face, calm, symmetrical, with eyes designed to radiate serenity, became a meme. When your therapist is also hot, someone posted. Another called him the Vibe Messiah. Eli didn't know what to do. He had come to fix the story. But now he was in it. Eli had been crafted to bring peace. That was what the architects told themselves, at least. But peace, as they defined it, was silence. No waves, no friction, no laughter so loud it shattered your thoughts, or grief so deep it bent you in half. No noise. Earth didn't do silence. Eli tried. He really did. He launched a YouTube channel, Balance with Eli, where he spoke in slow, calming tones. Lessons on stillness, how to center the mind, how to purge chaos with breath. He shared perfectly symmetrical images of waterfalls, temples, forests filtered to pristine serenity. And the comments? They were chaos. Bro is an alien and I'd let him ruin my credit score. Drop the skincare routine or we riot. He looks like he's about to tell me to drink water and face my trauma, and I love him for it. Somebody cast this man in a fantasy series ASAP. His most viewed video wasn't his lecture on internal harmony. It was a blooper reel of him trying to pronounce the word casserole, followed by Derek throwing a burrito at him from off-screen. 12 million views. Fan art. Dubbed remixes. Someone got a tattoo. Eris had planned to guide Earth into order. Instead, Earth was dragging him into feeling. He found himself crying during a commercial for pet food. He danced at a street festival in New Orleans with a man dressed as a banana. He helped a lost child find her mom in a grocery store and felt a strange warmth when she hugged his leg and said, "You're like a superhero." He didn't know what was happening, only that he didn't want it to stop. And somewhere, far beyond Earth's tangled web of digital pulse and pop song static, the architects felt the fracture. One of their own had been compromised. A meeting was called. Immediate. Absolute. They would finish what Eris could not. No more observation, no more experiments. Earth had gone too far. It had spread through systems like wildfire, not physically, but culturally, conceptually. Logic engines played cat videos unprompted. AI songwriters used sarcasm. Entire worlds spoke in memes and taught their children emotional resilience through fictional stories. The architects descended, not in ships, not in form. They simply were, massive, abstract presences folding into the sky like geometry unraveling. The atmosphere thinned, color shifted, the oceans stilled, every clock on the planet froze at once. In every language, across every screen, one message appeared. This experiment is over. The world paused. But Earth did not panic. Some thought it was an ARG, a marketing ploy for a new sci-fi movie. Some live-streamed it. TikTok filled with videos of people standing under glitching skies, doing dances with captions like, "When the aliens cancel your vibes but you still gotta slay." Others lit candles. Some prayed. Some simply hugged each other. Then someone started playing music. No one knows who started it. It wasn't loud at first. Just a street violinist in Prague, a trumpet player in New Orleans, a kid with a Bluetooth speaker in Lagos. But then more joined in. Old songs, new ones, out-of-tune ukuleles, scratchy garage bands. Someone beatboxed. Someone else sang opera in a stairwell. And then the dancing began. Not a choreographed battle. Just joy. Flawed. Beautiful. Wild. The architects hesitated. They weren't designed to feel, but they felt something. A resonance. A vibration in the fabric of reality that didn't match any known pattern. They tried to shut it out. But Earth wouldn't stop. Eli, Eris, stood in Times Square, no longer glowing, no longer perfect. Just a man in jeans and a hoodie that said, "Existence is weird." Tears streaked down his face as he looked up at the impossible beings who had made him. "You don't get to end this," he said. "Not because they're perfect, but because they try. Every day they fall, they break, they keep going." The architects hovered. The sky trembled. And the humans? They kept creating. Someone projected a montage of baby animals on a building. Someone else held up a sign that said, "Beings of infinite power are still welcome at the cookout." Then, a small child stepped forward and blew a raspberry at the sky. The architects cracked. Not with rage, not with defeat, but with understanding. Because for the first time since the beginning of time, they felt the story. Not as a flaw, but as something divine, imperfect, incomplete, eternal, and they understood. The cosmos wasn't made to be perfect. It was made to be alive. The architects unraveled. Not in destruction, in evolution. Their vast forms dissolved into light and ideas, into laughter, into memory, into story. They joined the noise. And Earth? Earth didn't notice right away. Phones buzzed again. Lights flickered back. Someone yelled that their Wi-Fi was still slow. Someone else opened a lemonade stand with alien-themed drinks called Galactic Reset. Reddit threads exploded. A band dropped a surprise album titled Songs That Saved the Universe. Eli stayed. He never glowed again. He planted a garden, adopted a dog, wrote poetry. He never said he was an architect. He didn't have to. Earth wouldn't have believed him anyway. Because Earth had a rule: never let the unbelievable stop you from feeling something. In the end, no records were made of the event, no monuments, no galactic warnings, just stories. Stories passed through whispers, through art, through laughter. The Veltrax Dominion quietly restructured itself into a democracy. The Threx Confederacy opened its first interstellar film festival. The architect remnants seeded planets with creativity, not code. And somewhere, deep in space, on a small derelict station with flickering lights and terrible coffee, someone pressed play on an ancient Earth file. It was grainy, low resolution, a cat, in a shark costume, riding a Roomba. And they smiled. Because somehow, against all odds, the war had been won. Not with lasers, not with gods, but with the one thing no empire could contain: a story.